Are solid color kilts more traditional or more correct for the Irish?
Are solid color kilts more correct or more traditional? Yes and no. It goes back to the question of how long is a tradition a tradition? How big does a thing have to be before it's the tradition or not the tradition? So
Right.
the solid color kilts, saffron, blue, green. Yes, they were worn before the Irish county tartans or the Irish tartans. The Irish tartans starting, again, one in 1956, the majority in the 70s, 80s, 90s. The solid color kilts are older, yes, but they were worn by many, many fewer people than now wear Irish county tartans. So if you want to be historically a little bit more historical minded, I won't say correct, I'll say historically minded, then sure, maybe wearing a saffron kilt or a solid blue kilt is fine. And that started again, early 1900s. If you want to be, but from my data that I have, as far as, the number that we sell, we sell 10 to 1 Irish county tartans, or probably more than that. Mac, you could probably speak to this as much as me. County tartans to solid color kilts.
Yeah, I think we will increasingly, we're having people from Celtic heritage in general wanting to do a more historically inspired look. And if you wanted to do something that was more old-timey, a little more romantic, and you wanted to groove on that Victorian, Edwardian, or uprising kind of period, then yeah, you might consider doing a solid color. There are some very famous individuals who were part of the spearhead of the nationalist aesthetic movement. Not always political, mind you. Sometimes it was purely a cultural interest, but these guys, it tended to go both ways. But from the cultural standpoint, people who were adopting the ancient Irish dress, even though it turned out to be mythic, as a statement. And they went with the solid colors because they wanted something that was removed from the Scottish tradition, so it was differentiated from that as well, but was absolutely not anglicized. That was the goal. So you had saffron coming in because of it being the color of the kings. You had Kelly green coming in because it had been a traditional color of Irish flags and Irish movements up until that time. Going back to some of the revolutionary flags and nationalist flags, even going back to the 18th century, green had become a thing. And then you have blue, which I'm surprised how many people don't know this, but blue is actually the original official color of St. Patrick. So when you look at some of the serious zealots, I'll say, of this movement back in the day, like William Gibson is probably my favorite because several of these guys were major converts over to Irish nationalism and Catholicism, many of them having been educated in upper echelon places like Oxford and Cambridge, and they kind of, went native, if you will. They realized there was a falsehood for them in how they'd been raised as part of being citizens of the British Empire, and so they went whole hog into Irish nationalism and trying to develop an Irish identity. And so you have these fantastic pictures of these guys. Again, William Gibson is my favorite, where they're in this whole, get up with, with the kilts and with Irish knotwork styled accessories and all this stuff. And, some of their brooches were great. If you want that kind of aesthetic, if you want to kind of honor those heroes, if you will, at the beginning of the movement, then yeah, maybe do a solid color. But I think the tartans are far more popular because they're just more interesting. They have another level of meaning because of geography and genealogy and stuff, and they're just more interesting to look at. Not everybody wants to be wearing blue or saffron.
Yeah, and I will go so far as to say this as well: a solid color kilt it needs the rest of the accoutrement. It needs the sporran. It needs some kind of vest or something. It looks a little like 2 degrees off. Not well. To me, anyway, I'll put my personal opinion on it. It looks a little bit off if it doesn't have the belt or the sport, or either vest or belt or sporran and the rest of it. You need all the accessories to go at it. If you're wearing a tartan kilt and you just have on a pair of sneakers and a t-shirt and a day sporran and a belt, you'd look fine. It might look a little bit odd if it's just, again, in my opinion only, one man's opinion. If it's a solid color kilt, it's a little bit off, but yes, there is a tradition of
it. And that's the irony too, because in some of these photographs, William Gibson keeps coming to mind because I love how he looked. They're not always using sporrans. That was another thing that those old timers considered secondary to what they're trying to accomplish, I'll say. So you don't always see them wearing a sporran as part of their national dress. But now it's like, it's hard to imagine anybody wearing a kilt without one. I mean, for aesthetic reasons as well as just practicality, you know,
Yeah.
where do you carry your stuff?
Absolutely.